Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a massive paradigm shift happening right now in the legal industry. And, to truly grasp the massive scale of what's coming, we're going to compare it to a journey we're all incredibly familiar with, the 115-year evolution of the automobile. So let's just get right into it. Let's kick things off with a shocking number. Over the past 40 years, from 1980 to 2020, the price of legal services in the United States has absolutely skyrocketed by roughly 275%. I mean, that is just a staggering increase. It far, far outpaces general consumer price inflation. And that number actually brilliantly illustrates a much wider, honestly fascinating economic trend. We've got this 40-year price divergence going on. What's happening is that human labor services, things like healthcare, education, and law, have become completely hyperinflationary. But meanwhile, heavily mechanized sectors, think electronics, consumer goods, transportation, they've seen their costs just completely plummet. In some cases, we're talking a 99% drop. So we've got this fundamental divergence between things done by human effort and things done by machines. Now, to put this legal cost crisis into a real-world perspective for us, the United States currently spends more on legal costs, over $500 billion every single year, than it does on its entire agricultural GDP. Just let that sink in for a second. We literally spend more money navigating legal risk and administration than we do on the entire system that feeds the nation. It's a massive, massive bottleneck for innovation and access to justice. Section 1. The Transportation Blueprint. To understand exactly how we're going to fix this legal cost crisis, let's look at how we already solved the exact same problem in transportation. Moving goods and people used to be prohibitively expensive, not to mention dangerous. But by shifting away from the muscular labor of horses, being constrained by animal endurance, and moving to mechanized vehicles, the cost of transportation eventually dropped by 99%. This productivity unlock radically democratized access to movement. Suddenly, you just didn't have to be incredibly wealthy to travel across the country. But notice the timeline here, because this absolutely did not happen overnight. It took a 115-year evolutionary timeline of really focused attention and infrastructure building. It started way back with the 1910 Model T, which first introduced mechanized infrastructure. Then, we spent decades refining that system with gas cars, basically teaching humans how to be better navigators. And only now in 2025 are we arriving at the autonomous Waymo, fully reinventing how we travel without a human driver. Section 2. Mechanizing the law. So here's where it gets really interesting. We can map that exact same transportation blueprint directly onto the modern legal industry. Just like those horse-drawn carriages were limited by animal endurance, modern legal practice relies heavily on what we can call brain muscular labor. Lawyers are doing this intense, heavy mental lifting every single day. But our society has become so globally connected and our network effects are so exponentially complex that traditional lawyers are now entirely overwhelmed. It's definitely not that they aren't working hard, it's just that human mental endurance simply cannot keep up with the sheer scale of modern global relationships. To solve this, we're seeing the rise of two very distinct fields, and we really need to distinguish between them. First, there's legal tech, which simply optimizes the old way of doing things. Basically, it just makes traditional law faster. But then there's legal engineering, and this is a major paradigm shift. Legal engineering fundamentally shifts the law into a completely new, machine-readable computational medium. To go back to our vehicle analogy for a second, legal tech is kind of like buying a high-tech robot to scoop manure in your horse stable. Sure, it definitely makes the labor slightly easier, and it removes the unsavory work, but it doesn't change the underlying paradigm. You're still completely relying on a horse. Legal engineering, on the other hand, is about replacing that horse entirely with a combustion engine. And while legal engineering might sound incredibly futuristic, the shift toward it actually began a really long time ago. Notice how this all builds on itself. It started with the 1450 printing press, which magically turned fluid oral human memory into standardized physical dry code. That text standardization paved the way for the 1970s, when Charles Goldfarb invented markup languages, bringing digital precision to text, which, in turn, allowed innovators like Nick Szabo in the 1990s to theorize smart contracts, transforming legal agreements into actual executing computational law. Section 3. The Attentive Human Navigator. So, if we are currently mechanizing the law, what does that actually mean for the human lawyer? You might be wondering, well, are they completely obsolete right now? Can we just switch on some self-driving legal algorithms to run our businesses and our societies? The absolutely crucial point here is that we are firmly in the mechanized phase, not the automated phase. Just like you couldn't put a 1910 Model T on autopilot, this new computational legal infrastructure absolutely requires a fully attentive human in the driver's seat. Remember, it took over 115 years to get from the Model T to the self-driving Waymo. We literally cannot skip the mechanization phase in law and just jump straight to automation. This is mainly because legal engineering often involves bespoke, highly customized applications. We aren't just dealing with simple, static, printed contracts anymore. We're dealing with dynamic digital relationships. And because these applications sit in this sort of gray area between a traditional legal deliverable and a digital product, human lawyers must act as fully attentive navigators from beginning to end. It's the only way to ensure extreme precision and ethical compliance. We can actually see the law's industrial life cycle playing out right in front of us. We're moving from the horse-drawn, direct labor of modern law right into the mechanical labor of a bus, where a human still actively drives and navigates. And this will happen long before we ever reach that fully automated sci-fi future. For now, we absolutely need human legal engineers to steer these complex new machines. Section 4. The future of legal access. So, how exactly is this new mechanical infrastructure finally being tested in the real world to bring down these crazy costs? Well, early iterations of computational law are currently being tested in environments known as network states. Some prime examples include the Zuzalalu movement in Switzerland or Prospera in Honduras. These zones utilize polycentric law sandboxes, which are essentially flexible, overlapping legal systems that allow for real-world testing. You can basically think of these spaces as the high-speed regulatory freeways necessary for these new legal vehicles to operate safely. Just as a modern car needs a paved freeway, not a dirt horse trail, computational law needs these specialized jurisdictions to experiment with governance as a service. And the end goal of testing on these freeways is pretty profound. As Nick Salvo theorized decades ago, the digital revolution completely changes human relationships. By using computers to run previously costly algorithms, these computational building blocks can drastically lower transaction costs. They strip away all that expensive overhead of traditional manual administration. Remember that 275% price increase we talked about earlier? This is how we dismantle it. Ultimately, the core key performance indicator, the true KPI for legal engineers, is abundance. The whole goal is moving away from a system bogged down by superstitious tradition and wildly expensive manual labor, and moving towards a framework governed by empirical facts. Imagine a world where setting up a complex, bulletproof family trust doesn't cost thousands of dollars and months of your time, but might only cost $10. That is the true democratization of law. Which leaves us with one incredibly exciting question to ponder. As the law becomes fully mechanized, what new legal destinations will you navigate to? When the crushing cost of legal bureaucracy is finally removed from the equation, and we achieve our 99% cost reduction just like we saw in transportation, what will humanity build next? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a powerful new lens through which to view the future of our legal systems.